Randy Couture, fantastic to see you. Great to talk to you. Really do appreciate the time today. No worries about the running late. I kind of figured you'd be in demand.
No worries, man. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. So let's jump right into it. With the Challenger Series underway and you being a judge this week, the first thing I wanted to ask you is what are you looking for from the competitors who are going to be vying for a spot in that regular season?
It's not that dissimilar in my evaluation of that athlete when they're walking out of that tunnel and coming out and stepping in. What's their demeanor like? Do they seem nervous? Do they seem uptight? All those are normal assessments, even as a commentator for the PFL that I'm registering. Maybe that's why, as a fighter, we get these jobs because we have a unique insight into this sport, both tactically and technically. The psychological skills it takes to walk out there under an adverse situation and environment and compete. And then it's about how they execute in the fight. How do they compete? What technical and tactical skills do they show, and how are you evaluating that to measure up with the skills that we know these athletes have in the regular season? I mean, that's what this is all about. This is about determining and ferreting out new talent and giving them an opportunity to sign a contract with a big organization and potentially get into the regular season, come through to the playoffs, and make it to the final, the championship, which is a big shiny title belt and $1 million. We had Carlos Leal come very, very close, come up a little short in the semis from last year's Challenger Series. Delano Taylor made it all the way to the final from the Challenger Series. So there's absolutely, and both those guys' fight records were pretty low. It wasn't like they had a plethora of fights and experience. So I think that's an indication of just how much talent is out there, and giving these athletes a place where they can go out there and show their wares, show their skill sets, and get a crack, get an opportunity is what the Challenger Series is all about. I like it a lot.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with the opportunity for someone like Delano Taylor or Sadabusi, who won it all last year, who's been in the PFL for a couple of years. These kinds of opportunities weren't necessarily around when you were in your heyday. I mean, you had all that success in the UFC. You tried your hand, to get away from that for a while. But nowadays, it almost feels like it's a whole new ballgame in terms of free agency, in terms of options with a league like the PFL. When you see how far the sport has come, what does that say to you?
Well, obviously, my first fight was UFC 13. It was still a tournament format. There were very few rules on the books back then. I think 4 rules on the books. We did the weigh in the lobby at the Holiday Inn in Augusta, Georgia. I didn't know a single guy I was fighting. There was no video footage. I couldn't study those tapes. I didn't even see those guys till we stepped on the scale. So that's how, now what? We're on the ticker on every sports channel out there. They're cordoning off half the arena to do the weigh-ins. It's changed tremendously since 1997 when I started. And the PFL is a huge step in the right direction, I think, for our sport. Getting back to the root of martial arts. It's not about publicity stunts or trash talk or any of that other stuff that seems to be rewarded in other places. It's about going out in that cage, executing tactics and technique that are going to score you points and win fights and give you a shot at the playoffs and ultimately a shot at that championship every year. That true sports format certainly asks these guys to embrace a grind and turn around every 6 or 7 weeks and fight again in the regular season. But most of them, to a man or woman, like knowing when their next fight's going to be and who their next fight's going to be against potentially, and the regularity of that. So I think those are all positive things that the PFL has done and fits right into this growth. We're the fastest growing sport in the world right now. We had 22 countries represented in the PFL last season. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. And there are organizations all over the planet now that are promoting and giving mixed martial artists an opportunity to be a professional athlete in our society. So it's a pretty cool time to be an MMA guy.
It definitely does feel like it's come full circle. When you talk about UFC 13 and the heavyweight tournament that you won, and now the PFL going back to that tournament format. One of the things that I've heard from competitors in this women's featherweight edition of the Challenger Series is there a possibility of more than one spot in the regular season being handed out because it's a new weight class this year? Have you heard anything? Is there ever a chance that you could see 2 fighters moving forward?
I think there's a possibility, especially if you start talking about the women's divisions, because on the whole, if there's been an issue in the women's division, and certainly the PFL created the 155-pound division solely for Kayla Harrison. We're the only organization that had that division. Obviously, we're doing away with that division now, moving into 145 and 135 in the women's divisions. Is depth, and so creating an opportunity for more women and getting more women into each of those divisions, I think, is exactly what we need to do. We need to give more opportunities to more women and create more places for them to fight. And the PFL is certainly doing that by adding a new weight class. And, I think, it'll be interesting to see how Kayla does, cutting down to 145 now. Can Larissa Pacheco, stay in and come down to 145? Is she going to be able to make that transition since that change is being made now in the PFL? I think that's one of the reasons why they made that change, because it was hard to fill a full field of highly competitive women at 155. There's a lot more gals at 145 and 135. That's going to give us more depth. And I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility that more than one contract will be given out in those divisions to get a full field of very talented females.
Well, definitely looking forward to the Challenger Series. You mentioned Kayla Harrison there. She did have that one fight in Invicta during the pandemic where she
Mm-hmm.
cut down to 145, looked good. Word is she's not going to be in the regular season. She's doing the super fights. Is there any fight that you really want to see her, be it Julia Budd, be it Chris Cyborg, be it a rematch with Pacheco? Who do you want to see Kayla Harrison up against this year?
Well, I know Kayla, and Kayla wants that rematch with Pacheco for sure. Now, is she going to shy away from Cyborg or Nunez or any of these other top females? Um, I don't think so. She's as competitive a person as I've ever met, and as diligent and forthright as any athlete I've been around too. She does a great job. So I know her. She wants that match back for sure. So we'll see when and where that happens. But I think she savors the opportunity to fight any of those top gals because her goal is to be considered the top female in our sport. Actually, the top athlete in our sport. Forget gender. She doesn't care. She wants to be considered the best athlete in our sport. And I think she's well on her way and in that conversation already.
Absolutely. And I think the rematch is a big part of that. Something I would be remiss not to ask you about because it's coming up this weekend as well is the retirement of Fedor Emelianenko. And you were announced earlier today as being one of the fighters who's going to be there for his, I
Yeah.
guess, swan song, Farewell in the Cage, bringing in some contemporaries and past opponents and whatnot. What does Fedor retiring mean to you? What did he mean to the sport?
Well, he's the epitome of a competitor in our sport. He, no nonsense, rarely spoke. That walk out was so stoic and amazingly Russian, honestly, that I think he captured the imagination. And then the way he competed, as explosive as anybody, both from that right hand that you better be aware of and his submission skills. He was just a very, very well-rounded fighter that fought the best guys in the heavyweight division. To include, Mirko Krokop, Nogueira, Danny Henderson. I mean, I think all of us are going to be there to honor the career that he put forth and the example that he set for everybody in this sport.
He certainly is a man of few words. You've got that right. I wanted to ask. I mean, we know the story of the lawsuit and you moving away from the UFC and how that went. And then there was talk later on that maybe Ryzen had offered you a shot at Fedor for a New Year's Eve card. How close did you come to actually getting that fight done at any point?
I never got an offer from Ryzen. Maybe it was something they thought about, but they never reached out to me or my team. Obviously, when Fedor came back out of retirement, my phone rang a lot. The initial push to make the Fedor fight happen, obviously, a lot of rankings had him ranked number one in the world and me ranked number two. And so I was pushing the UFC, like, look, this is the fight I want. I want to be the number one guy in the world. I want to fight the best guys in the world. So make this fight happen. And obviously, they couldn't make it happen. They threw significant money at him, but there were a lot of ancillary things that the M1 group that kind of owned his contract wanted, and the UFC wasn't willing to concede on any of those things. So the fight never happened. Mark Cuban tried to help me make that fight happen somewhere else. They filed injunctions and all that, and we're trying to bleed me of money, knowing that I didn't have a bottomless pit of funds to try and make that fight happen. So at some point, push comes to shove. I got, the window's closing for me to continue to compete at that level. I had to make a decision, and it was obvious the fight wasn't going to happen. And I just had to let go of that. It was fun to do the photo shoot for Affliction and all that, and kind of stir the pot and get to have dinner with him. That was the sole, most amount of time I got to spend with him. He's a very, very well-read individual that just stays to himself and stays laser focused on what his goal was and what he's going to accomplish. And, that's, I think, a great example of what a martial artist is supposed to be like, to be honest. So, I'm excited to be able to be there Saturday and pay homage to his career and everything that he's done for this sport.
Well, I think for a lot of fans, that's the one that kind of got away. Is that how it is to you too? If you look back at your career, are there any regrets? Is that one, or do you just look at it? You know what? I did what
I
I
wouldn't even
accomplished.
call that. Yeah, I wouldn't even call that a regret. Yeah, that's the fight I wanted at that time. I had to come to terms with the likelihood that was never going to happen and move on. And so I wouldn't call it a regret. I certainly wish, when we were both in our prime at that time, we could have hooked up and see how it went. And I think it probably could have been a really amazing thing, especially if you think about, keeping him in Pride and doing a crossover, kind of a Super Bowl of fights between the UFC heavyweight champ and the Pride heavyweight champ. I think that would have been a pretty cool thing for the sport. But, at the end of the day, no regrets. I did everything I set out to accomplish in this sport and tried to represent the sport with integrity. And I think a lot of fans pat me on the back and still appreciate that to this day. So I think I did what I set out to do.
Absolutely. Champ in two weight classes, Hall of Famer. I could spend the next 10 minutes talking about the accolades. Just moving away from fighting for a second, the Expendables 4, I believe, is due out later this year. What can you
Yes.
tell us about that project?
Amazing. Had a great time. We shot in London, Bulgaria, Sofia, Bulgaria, and Thessaloniki, Greece. Last year, we finished in early December. Just did some ADR and some pickup scenes for that. It's scheduled to come out September 22nd, 2023. I'm excited to see it. There are only 4 original Expendables left in this one. Myself, Jason Statham, Dolph Lundgren, and obviously Sylvester Stallone. So some new faces showing up. An absolute honor and pleasure to get to know and work with Andy Garcia in this one. Megan Fox, 50 Cent, Curtis Johnson in this one. Has had a great time working with all of them. Iki, Tony Jai, some spectacular martial artists from both those guys and great guys to be around as well. So I think it's going to be a great film. I think everybody's going to love this one.
One of the cool things about that series, and you mentioned it there, is how many of the action stars, martial arts stars it brings all together. Is this the last one? Can you see another one happening down the line with or without Sly? I know he's getting up there. Maybe he wants to move on. I don't know, but
Well, I think you're seeing a little transition from Sly being the predominant character in all the Expendables, and you're seeing a little shift now to Jason Statham. I don't think Sly's going away. I think Sly's always going to be a part of this property in one way or another. He's the one that developed it. He wrote the first script, and he's heavily involved in this intellectual property. So I don't see that going away. At least I hope that doesn't go away. He's an amazing guy. I have a lot of respect for him. It's been fun to work with him and get to know him and see how he operates and why he's been as successful in this endeavor of filmmaking for as long as he has. Yeah, I think there will be another one. I think this one's going to do very, very well in the box office. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's a business decision, right? It's about making money. So I think if this one does well in the box office, then you're absolutely going to see Expendables 5.
well, looking forward to it. You got my ticket as it stands. Love you as Toll Road. I'm going to bring this back around to the PFL now. Obviously, you're a judge on this installment. Are we going to see you later on in the season as a judge, or is it just going to be this week?
I'm doing 2 more Challenger Series as a judge in this season's Challenger Series. So that'll be 3 total times. There would have been a 4th one in there, but I had a conflict with a film, with a filming project. So that'll be my only opportunities to judge the Challenger Series this season. And then obviously we'll be back in the booth with Sean and Kenny for the regular season and all the regular season fights.
Looking forward to that. So one last question before I let you go, Randy, and thanks again for the time. Really do appreciate it. Is there any fight out of either this week or coming up on the Challenger Series or in the regular season? Is there any fight or any athlete that you really have your eye on coming up?
Yeah, I'm anxious to see Brendan Loughnane back in there this season. See if he's going to stay in the season or if he's going to move. Now this will be his third season in the regular season. If obviously, I'm sure he's become a marquee name in the UK now after winning a championship. They are starting the European PFL this season as well. I'm sure he will be a big part of that in some way, shape, or form. I was just really, really impressed with everything he did in the 2 seasons he competed in the PFL already, culminating in the championship last season. Um, it'll be interesting to see where he goes this season. But there's so many amazing athletes out there that's just been the fun getting to know some of these folks who are have trouble pronouncing their name, let alone knowing where they came from. But it's been a blast.
Absolutely. I think Brendan took the most of that snub on the Contender Series, turned it into absolute gold in the PFL and literal gold in the PFL last season. So that is a good one. Looking forward. Randy and the Natural Couture, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the PFL season.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.